I'm Molly Hurford. I've been riding for, gosh, like 15 years now. I got started in triathlon and very quickly developed a deep love of cyclocross. And as a writer for my entire life, that turned into writing about cyclocross and writing about bikes and writing books about bikes and writing for pretty much every cycling magazine. And it's sort of spiraled from there. And now I do coaching and I teach yoga and I've managed professional teams and, I get to host cool things like this. So basically my entire world is bikes. So that's me in a very, very, very compressed nutshell. So I want to ask actually all of our panelists to introduce themselves as just sort of how they got into riding and sort of what their role in cycling in Ontario is now. So Sandra, let's maybe start with you.
Hi, I'm Sandra Beaubien. My main cycling sport I do is mountain biking. I got into it about 19 years ago. I have been a huge advocate for mountain bike trail access in the Ottawa region as president of the Ottawa Mountain Bike Association for 5 years. And now I'm a co-owner of a mountain bike construction company called Ride Ottawa.
Awesome. Oh, and say where you're from. Obviously, Sandra's Ottawa.
Ottawa.
All right, Charlotte, you're up next.
Cool. Hey, everyone. My name is Charlotte Batty. I primarily mountain bike, but I dabble with a little bit of gravel riding and traveling to ride all across the continent. I grew up in mountain biking, so I actually got into the sport at a really young age through racing. I have 3 older siblings that raced, and so just kind of chased after them, which has evolved into the career I have now, which is professional mountain bike instructing. So I currently have my own business just outside of Toronto, teaching people how to mountain bike better, their mountain biking, things like that. And community is a big thing for me. So helping build a community. So through the events that we do, getting women like everybody that's on here to be connected. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Lest you think we have only mountain bikers on here. And I'm going to go to you next.
Hi everyone, my name is Guzman and I'm a former road cyclist. So it's been a while. My last race was in 2012, but I still love riding. Admittedly, I don't ride my road bike much. I ride my mountain bike, but not like a real mountain biker like everyone else on here, more of like a flatlander mountain biker. And after I finished road racing, my road racing ended as I started building my sports nutrition business. So now I'm a sports nutritionist and taking a master's in science in school again, but predominantly I own a sports nutrition business and I work with 99.9% cyclists. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Oh, and before I ask Chantal to go next here, maybe actually all of us can drop into the chat just any website and like social media links that you want everyone to kind of be able to catch up with you. That way they can people can kind of stalk you during this if they feel so inclined. So feel free to drop those in. And Chantal, on to you.
Hi, I'm Chantal. I live in Milton. I actually moved here because of the velodrome getting built. I've been in cycling since I was 11. I began coaching at the age of 19. I've been coaching for 15 years now, so you can guess my age. I am super passionate about coaching youth cyclists. I have raced road, I've raced track. I do fat biking. I just got a fat bike over the holidays, so that's kind of fun. I'm learning to love the sport again over the pandemic as I have some newfound free time. I'm a commissaire, national level cyclocross. I also happen to work for the Ontario Cycling Association. I coach some of their projects. I am also now in their events department, so helping organizers, a little bit of everything.
Excellent. And ooh, we have to remember to ask you all about how women can get more into event organizing, because let me tell you, I was trying to find a woman who puts together bike races and it was challenging. So I'm just saying there's an opening there for women to get involved with event coordination. And I would like to point out that women would be so much better at it than some of the men doing it now.
The organization factor for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And the goodie bags. The swag for sure. All right, Kate, you are up, and your partner here.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Sparling, and this is my daughter, Mael, who has just turned 7. So I got into cycling about 17 years ago, predominantly mountain biking, definitely a lot of fat biking through the winter. And so I've been involved with the Collingwood Off-Road Cycling Club We are a super inclusive mountain bike based group in the Collingwood area, and we modeled ourselves off of Sorka out in Squamish. And so that was a big adventure. We're heading into our 4th summer, and it's really about bringing people from our community out to explore our trails in the area in a safe and fun environment. And also about bringing up the next generation to get involved and make cycling accessible for the kids in our community.
Excellent. And it should also be noted, like, Kate is one of the main people who came up with the idea for CORE. And in like the first year, we had what, like 400 people join, which is pretty amazing for a little casual.
It's crazy. So we're actually in touch with a member of the board from the Squamish Cycling Club last night. And really, when we first sat around a dining room table at Molly's place, there was a handful of us being like, hey, this might be a neat idea for the Collingwood area. We need some friends. We can't do this alone. And so we kind of brought together a group of people from diverse aspects of the cycling community. And we hoped maybe to have 50 members our first year. That would have been success in our books. And it was just over 200. And then last year, our 3rd season, we were just over 600 members. So it's
insane.
It's insane.
Yeah. So I wanted to mention that, just even as people are thinking about, you know, oh, I want more cycling in my community, I want to meet more women in sport. I mean, honestly, if you build it, they apparently will come.
The pent-up demand is beyond anyone's imagination, and in most communities is my belief.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Jenny, you are up.
Awesome. Well, I think this is really amazing. I'm going to start with that, with like 47 people here. This is really exciting. Thanks so much, guys. I started in the sport, I feel really old when I say it was like almost 25 years ago. And I also raced as a junior and just loved the sport. It's been a passion of mine, and turned after I retired, after actually racing with Anne in 2011. It was almost 10 years ago now, and moved over to coaching, and I've kind of lived all over during that period, but I'm now here in Milton. I, like Chantal, moved here for the velodrome. I work for the national team as a track endurance next gen coach. And so, yeah, my life has been the same group of people over the last 25 years, because we all tend to like hang out here in cycling, but it's really awesome. And at the same time, this is really exciting for me to see so many names I don't know, and just to get to be a part of this today. So thanks so much for organizing, Molly, and for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. And I'm super stoked to kind of get into both the challenges and the cool parts about being women in cycling. And I think like the one thing I kind of wanted to say before I get into like what is the biggest challenge is, one thing that I noticed with women's cycling is there's a lot of this discussion of like women cyclists. And while we certainly are women cyclists, I also really want people to feel like it's okay to be women and cyclists. I think a lot of the time we kind of get into this, like, we have to have this women's track. And I know a lot of the women on the call here, we work with guys in the industry, and, a lot of guys have helped us get into where we are in sport. So I think just like not being afraid of, not just doing women only rides, but also being okay showing up on, the beginner ride at the club, or, going to a clinic that's being put on by a male coach. Just kind of not feeling like we need to pigeonhole ourselves in as women cyclists. We can also be cyclists who happen to be women. So just wanted to put that out there. Okay, cool. So let's start with kind of the tough thing, because I know a lot of women who came on here had questions about like, how do you break into cycling? It's really tricky. So I wanted to hear from everyone what the greatest challenge you dealt with, whether it's getting into cycling, like when you got into it for fun, or when you started kind of getting into it in a more serious, like career-oriented sort of way. I'll say for me, the greatest challenge I really dealt with was just not knowing anything about cycling when I first got into it, because my dad rode, but back in the 80s when bike shorts were still made with wool and leather as the chamois. And, I was in college. I was not home with him. He was not there to give me all these tips or anything. So I just kind of got into it just sort of on my own. And it took me years before I learned about bib shorts, or I learned that you should actually pump up your tires before they're completely flat. Doing a criterium race with your tires at like 10 PSI, not a great idea, as it turns out, but that's not the kind of thing that like someone who just got into cycling and doesn't have a cycling community would know. Like, I imagine there's a lot of people on this call that are like, what the heck is she even talking about? So I think my biggest thing was not having a community to go to get all this information. So trying to kind of find it on my own. And when I did find a community, it completely changed everything. But that was a huge challenge for a couple of years, especially as, weirdly enough, a very shy human being. Stuff like this scares the crap out of me. But I keep doing it because I really like being able to bring more women into this fold and say that it's actually not as scary as you think it is. All right, cool. I'm going to mix up the order of operations just to keep everyone guessing. So Jenny, I'm actually going to start with you on this one. Greatest challenge you've experienced in your career or in racing?
I think it's generally one of the things about coming up through the road side of the sport is it does have a very old boys network sense to it, and just getting the respect that it deserves. And that goes from, when I was racing and people are like, yeah, but that's just women's racing, those kind of sentences, right up to the challenges of being one of the only female staff at a lot of the, or sorry, not staff, because we are in Canada actually have very diverse from a gender point of view staff, but things like if I go to a World Cup, there's 24 coaches on trackside, and I'm one of maybe 2 or 3 women, and that's like a really progressive day. So getting that respect, and just assuming that there is a certain level that I actually do know what I'm talking about. So that's been a challenge through there. I think one of the joys of being a woman in sport is we actually have to just be better. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think we have to be better at what we do. And we have to kind of bring that positivity and know that there will always be somebody who is a bit of a bro who is going to get a little bit more respect until people get to know you. And so I would say, yeah, my biggest challenge has been constantly feeling like I need to prove myself and having that kind of validated that I do need to prove myself. But that having been said, I feel like I've got to a place where I'm pretty okay with that. And I use it to help me get better at what I do, as opposed to as something that brings me down. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And I think it's something I've talked to a bunch of female pros about. And to some extent it's kind of frustrating that women cyclists or women in cycling have not only the burden of like being great at their jobs in cycling, but then also have to basically be this like shining light as women in cycling. And it can be exhausting at times, for sure. And it's an added challenge for female professionals, for sure. And thank goodness they're doing it, because we've gotten very, very far in the last couple of decades in sport, which is pretty sweet. All right, Kate, you're up. Greatest challenge.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people can relate to this. I'm actually quite an introvert. I have to push myself out of my limits all the time. Like, even when I show up and I know people, I'm kind of like, hi. Like I'm not a big extrovert, do well in social situations. And so for me, I used to be really hard on myself when I would go on a group rides and feel like I was bringing the group down, or that people were having to wait for me. And I was intimidated. I wouldn't join. I didn't even have fun half the time because I was so worried about everyone else's perception of how I might have been impacting their ride. And it took me a really long time to understand that if someone who's, stronger than me agrees to come on a ride with me, they are agreeing to ride at my level. And they know that going in, and I need to stop worrying about how I am impacting them and just focus on my own joy in the sport. And so even now I see I've been riding a long time now. My skills have improved greatly, and I'll invite other women who are just starting out. Hey, do you want to go for a ride? And they're always like, oh, no, I don't want to hold you up. And it's like, no, I'm inviting us to ride together. I understand that I will be riding at your level, at your comfort zone, at your pace, and I'm okay with that. I am signing up for that. If I didn't want to do that kind of ride, I wouldn't have offered. I'll just go ride on my own or with other people. So I think I really had to change my mentality on, if someone invites me to ride, they know what they're signing themselves up for. They know, they knew I was just starting out. They knew my technical skills weren't that great yet, and they were okay with it, and I needed to be okay with it too. And I also think it's okay to ride. It's great to ride with people who are better than you. You learn so much. Like, I think probably all of the women on this call can attest that they've ridden with other men and women who push them outside their comfort zones and help them improve and get stronger and learn technical ability, and help them develop into the rider they are today. And I will also say there are some men out there who are awesome to ride with. They totally get it. They will guide, they will support, they will coach, they will cheer you on. And there's those that don't. And you just don't ride with them. But I think we can't all, I think Molly started it off at the beginning where, you know, it's okay. Ride with dudes, ride with women, ride with everybody. It's fun. And, you know, those that don't understand it, okay, you don't do that a second time. But then there's those who will really be your biggest cheerleader. And they're the ones you obviously spend time with. And I think joining a local cycling club that is not a race club, I mean, unless that's your goal. If your goal is to race, great, go race. But otherwise, just get into a local recreational club, and it's the best way to meet people. They usually offer something for all levels, all abilities, and I think it's great to support the community. And usually there's businesses that are supporting those clubs as well, and that's how you get into that cycling world, that cycling community, that tight-knit group. You got to put yourself out there a little bit. It's hard when if you're an introvert like I am, and you're not a joiner. I'm not a joiner. I am an independent sport kind of person, but cycling can kind of bring you the best of both worlds, in my opinion.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. All right, Chantal, greatest challenge.
I'm going to give a couple answers to this. The first is actually just, again, the entry to the sport. So I entered the sport because my brother was cycling. And I know most females enter the sport because a spouse or a sibling, typically male, are doing it. And I joined a club of like master men. They are all from Trinidad and Guyana. And like, I was having saddle issues, and Molly's heard the story before. And I'm like, I'm hurting. And they're like, we don't talk. No, here's a saddle that's like 3 inches thick, and like, never talk about that again. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so literally for the first 10 years of my cycling life, I had no females on my team. So that was interesting, getting into the sport, and continuing with that. I really had no female mentorship in the sport. Like there weren't female coaches. So when I got into coaching, I was the only female coach. You know, I was the only one taking the courses. I was the only one trying to find jobs. So that lack of mentorship, now we definitely see a lot more. But, you know, 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't there. And then even in recent years, like Jenny said, almost having to work twice as hard. I've again, fully qualified coach, taken all the coaching courses, been doing it for years. And I was passed up over a male who had 0 coaching courses under their belt for a coaching job. So definitely having to prove myself because I'm a female. So yeah, it's hard, but you know what? I've kind of learned to roll with it. And I've gained a lot of confidence through the process, and I really don't let it bother me so much anymore. And I think it can be seen through my confidence when I go for an interview, or when I speak to others, or when I try to build the sport up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think, you know, I've had similar kind of situations, and I've almost been able, I've realized, to use being a woman to my advantage because there are so few women in the sport that honestly, a lot of times at this point, like, you can say, hey, you need women in this organization. And a lot of the time they're like, oh crap, we do, because we're going to get in trouble if we don't. So what used to be a kind of a hindrance, we'll say like a decade ago, is starting to slowly turn around. Maybe not for the right reasons, but it is getting there for sure. Yeah, but yes. All right, Anne, your greatest challenge.
I have to say everyone's challenges are very relatable, except for Jenny's at the world-class coaching level. Don't relate to that one, but I feel for you and I hear you. So yeah, I'm listening to them and I'm thinking, yeah, no, I had that one too. I had that one too. So I was thinking, I came from wrestling at university into cycling. So I had a real challenge of, obviously just the fitness, but I had to really wake up to the fact of that cycling is a long game and it takes time to become a good cyclist. And, I was fortunate that I did quickly meet a community and, hired a coach who happened to have a lot of experienced cyclists training with her, Denise Kelly. So I was really lucky, but it did take me a while to realize that. But I was, one thing I would say is it's so important to have those experienced people around you. And maybe these days that doesn't happen as much with Zwift and all these, people learning online. So you're learning how to get strong and fast, but maybe you're lacking those experienced people around you. So it took me a while to really have it sink in that this is going to take a long time, and that's okay. And I am the type of person that didn't mind, this might sound crazy, but I would get lapped 3 times in an O Cup. And in my mind, I was like, keep going, you've got this. I had this ridiculous positive attitude that eventually actually wasn't as positive. I'm going to say the better I got, I almost lost that, but it's that green beginner. You're just so eager. And I think once I realized that it was a long game and I was interested in it, then that made it easier because, I would look at someone who was racing at the top level and rather than say, oh, they must be so talented, I realized, no, they've been racing for a long time and they've put in a lot of work. So I think that was an early challenge, but as soon as I recognized it and accepted that that's the way it was going to be, like, it was a good thing to recognize. And yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, for sure. All right, Charlotte, you're up. Greatest challenge.
Ooh. Okay, I have 2 answers, but my first one's going to be something a little bit different. So I'm the youngest of 4 siblings, and I grew up in the competing side of cross-country mountain biking. And if anybody's familiar with that discipline, I have an older sister who's very successful, races professionally. So my greatest struggle was always kind of dealing with that pressure of the last name that I have and the association with my sister. I looking back, I'm like, I had a very successful racing career, but I hit this point where I was like, I just don't want to race anymore. And I just felt like I had this kind of profile and like persona to kind of live up to in a way because of my sister and what my older siblings were doing. So, yeah, it was always interesting because I always got oh, you're Emily Baddie's sister, or how does it feel racing against your sister? And I was at the end of the day, it was never about competing against my sister. So it was always just kind of a weird thing to be asked. And I definitely put a lot of pressure on myself to try to put myself in her shoes and follow in her footsteps. Anyways, when I was turning 19 and moving into the elite side of the career of my racing career, I just had this moment, and I remember getting ready to go ride for a training ride and just breaking down in my garage and sobbing. And I'm I can't do this. I can't go out and train anymore. I just couldn't do it. And I just had this epiphany of I can't, I'm done. I don't want to race anymore. So fast forward kind of 6 months to a very hard and challenging transition of kind of removing myself from the identity I'd had my whole life up until that point. I took a break, started guiding a local women's mountain bike club here in Toronto and Barrie, and very quickly found what my calling was and what I was supposed to do in the sport. And it was not racing. It was just building the mountain bike community and getting people out on mountain bikes and sharing the stoke and the passion. And I just remember when I made that decision and that transition, the weight that came off of my shoulders and that pressure I had on myself and that feeling of trying to follow my sister's footsteps, just completely melted away. And it's really cool to this day. I'm we both are professional cyclists in a way. It's just we have 2 very different careers. And I laugh at I'm I wouldn't trade her lifestyle for a minute. But then that said, kind of touching on what Jenny and the other girls have said is being a female professional in the sport, you do very much have to feel you're proving yourself. And I work with one of our certifying bodies, the Professional Mountain Bike Instructors Association. And it's really awesome this year. I've seen they've brought a lot more female course conductors on, but the first year that I started my training, I remember doing the training and I was the only girl out of like 10 guys. And I was like, oh, like it just feels so awkward. And like, I have to work so much harder to like prove that I earned my spot there. So yeah, kind of touching on what everybody else has sort of experienced on some level. So anyway, so that's my challenge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually we had someone, Samina in the chat said, hearing all of these stories is helping her as a new rider who doesn't necessarily have someone to ride with or a coach. And yeah, I mean, I'd say that's probably how all of us started, was riding kind of by ourselves and without a coach. Well, except for Charlotte, who had to chase her older brothers and sisters around, which is arguably worse in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, it's scary when you're kind of setting out on those first rides by yourself, for sure. And I mean, I'd say all of us are lucky we live in, fairly urban areas where there are, local cycling clubs, but that definitely isn't the case everywhere. So I kind of wanted to just acknowledge that not everyone has the, cycling clubs and local bike shops doing group rides around them. So there are definitely tougher places to be, which is why you should try to start one. If you don't have a group ride at your local bike shop, go in and tell them to start one. Is definitely a step in the right direction. All right, Sandra, your greatest challenge.
My greatest challenge will have a bit of a different twist to it. So my greatest challenge was actually doing advocacy work to get more beginner and intermediate trails opened up in the Ottawa region. So when I started mountain biking in the early 2000s in Ottawa, it was a very male-dominated sport in a trail network that is just tons of rocks out in Canada. And it was hard, and I fell a lot, and other women would come out to the group rides, and then I'd never see them again. And there was a really big attitude that this was what mountain biking was, and this is how it should stay. So I moved to New Zealand in 2009. And lived there for 2 years. And I rode fast, flowy trails for the first time. I rode with a women's only group for the first time. So my mind was blowing. So then I came back to Ottawa in 2011, and I said to myself, I want to have what I had in New Zealand, but I want it in Ottawa. So I worked really hard to advocate for some beginner trail networks, which again, some people told me, oh, I don't know, no one will be interested in that. Now they're the busiest trail networks. I also advocated for more intermediate trails. And again, we have more of those. We have a bike park now. So, I mean, all that took a lot of time. It took, joining a board of directors, which was, all males at the time. And I asked a couple of the board of director members, like, is it okay that I'm a woman joining the board? Is it okay that I'm a woman who's an intermediate mountain biker joining the board? So, I mean, back in 2011, it was kind of uncharted territory, and it was a bit of a challenge in that sense. But I mean, you also have to push yourself, and like Molly said, get out of your comfort level. And, even though you don't like doing something and you get nervous doing it, then, just kind of keep at it. And, having different levels of trails in a region is huge to open up the sport to more and more people.
Oh, I love that. And honestly, what you just said about getting involved with like your local board of whether it's trails, whether it's like another advocacy group, even if the large cycling clubs all have boards, and like, if you want a way to kind of get right in there, getting on those boards, or like just asking to kind of sit in on that stuff, that's how you like really kind of get right in the mix. It's messy, but you'll get in. Actually, Sandra, I kind of want to stick with you because I wanted to ask you and Charlotte this. Since you are both excellent mountain biking skills coaches, I mean, what are your tips for dealing with trails that are just terrifying and intimidating, and like, oh God, there's a log that I can't picture myself getting over? What are some tips for that?
I'll start since I'm already unmuted. So the first tip I have is that what you see of mountain biking in the media, of all of these extreme moves and all of this insanity, there's a very small percentage of people who actually mountain bike like that. And my favorite woman that I coached last year, one of my favorites, she said to me on the first lesson, I'm not into this for the adrenaline. I just want to have a nice ride in the forest. And that is what mountain biking is.
Oh, so good. Charlotte, what about you?
Oh my gosh, Sandra, I can not relate, or sorry, I can't relate any more to that. Like, oh my goodness. I feel like a lot of our job is just educating people on what mountain biking actually is versus like what you see on the media. I think the best thing you can do is think about like any other sport that you're starting into, like skiing, for example. It's so common for people to, hey, I want to pick up skiing, so I'm going to take a lesson. Mountain biking is no different. So my best piece of advice is if you're really like keen on learning and building like a strong foundation on the bike so you can ride things like comfortably, confidently, and like safely, invest in like the proper equipment, invest in your learning and like starting off on literally the right pedal stroke. So hire a professional. Like there are women coaches like Sandra and I that you can come to us, you can ask us those like awkward and intimate questions. Like there's no dumb question. So definitely like yeah, invest in yourself and work with a professional to start off on the right pedal stroke.
Oh, so good. Okay, what else? Someone actually had asked about if there are any road bikers out there, and obviously, you know, we have a couple on here, but I also wanted to just kind of throw out, actually, you know what? Let's get you to actually say something here. What are your best tips for just rocking it on the road when you first get started? Because I think where we totally miss things is like, most of us kind of like, we get the mountain bike skills. We're like, okay, like obviously I can't bunny hop, but you're like, I can ride a bike. Of course I can road ride. Like that should be a no-brainer. But then suddenly, you know, you're trying to keep up with a group. You're like in the draft, you're trying to corner. Everything's terrifying. So yeah, Anne, best tips for getting going on the road.
I mean, from my experience, I think it's so valuable to ride with experienced riders. And that does not mean you have to go hammer with experienced riders. So even if you, like every one of us on this panel, we at least know 20 riders, right, that have raced their bikes. Even if like we got together, obviously COVID safe, and rode an easy ride, there's so much value to learning simple skills like, you know, you could ride beside someone and show them where their handlebars should go when you're cornering in a crit, or you could get together with a small group when it's safe and learn how to echelon at a slow pace, right? So I think it's super valuable to use experienced riders. And like I said earlier, sometimes these days, like so many people are training inside, and so you might show up on the road with all this power, but doesn't necessarily mean you know how to ride your bike and have the skills. So skills are so important. I know in Mississauga, we have a Learn to Ride group. I know that the Niagara Club is really great with new young riders. There, and Chantal putting up her hand there. So yeah, I mean, it's so great to be able to go and practice not only your power, but your skills and how to actually race a bike. So to me, I think I was really fortunate to start with a group of experienced riders, and they, you know, people are really, they want to help you, right? They want to. And sometimes what I see on a group ride is, it's unfortunate, but sometimes I'll see a young rider not want to listen to the 60-year-old on the ride because, well, what do they know? But trust me, they know a lot, right? They probably raced their bike for 20 years, and there's a lot of value in that. So even if you can go on easy rides with people who have been racing, I think there's so much to learn.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so someone actually had asked about sort of figuring out what type of riding to do, and they're sort of just getting in, because I mean, even, you know, among here, we're like, okay, mountain bike, gravel, cyclocross, road, track, all of those things. So actually, Chantal, I was wondering if you could maybe speak to just, you know, within sort of like the OCA's sort of stuff, like there's a lot of stuff you can do to kind of figure out what you want to ride. So we kind of speak to someone who wants to kind of dabble. Where should they start?
So first off, I just want to answer a question that's in the chat here.
Ooh, yes.
They're asking about the ride group in Mississauga. The Mississauga group that runs the Learn to Ride, Learn to Race program is Midweek Cycling Club. I'm a little biased because I run the programming. It is a volunteer job though, but it is fantastic. And included in those tips and tricks during non-COVID times, or if you have a member of your household when just first starting on the road. A couple really important lessons are: look where you want to go, relax, relax your body, and contact is inevitable. So go practice it. Go ride in a grassy field and practice making contact. Right now, it has to be with somebody in your household, but get comfortable with it. It will happen, and it'll prevent you from crashing in the future. So that's my advice on that part. I had to say something there. But if you're interested in getting into cycling, on the OCA webpage, you can actually search for clubs by name and by region. So hopefully you can find something in your area. The other thing is just call us at the office, because oftentimes not every club does a learn to ride, learn to race program. So if you call me and you're in Mississauga area, I'm going to recommend Midweek Cycling Club. If there's a youth and they're in the Hamilton area, I know of youth clubs, NCCH, and they run tons of skills and stuff. Again, we're talking non-COVID times right now, because it's a little tough. Well, actually right now we're not allowed to be doing any group riding. And even during COVID times when we were allowed group riding, it was spaced out, which isn't the best for learning skills. It's at least a start. And then hopefully when we all have our vaccines and we can ride a little bit closer, you can actually practice and brush up on those skills.
Yes. And I will add, I mean, in Ontario, especially if you live in sort of the GTA, there's a couple of really great places you can go. I mean, the Trek in Milton has awesome, like, learn to ride stuff where you can test out a track bike. And, like, you know, maybe you're not really thinking about track, but honestly, why not? It's pretty sweet. And then there's, you know, the Joyride 150 indoor bike park. So you can take out like a jump bike and, like, you know, learn how to use the pump track. And even if you're, you know, okay, maybe you're not going to be a BMX superstar, but you know what, that's going to help you a ton on the mountain bike or on the road. So honestly, like, trying out all of those different skills at places where you can borrow or rent a bike, you could go to Horseshoe and actually rent a downhill bike and try that out. Really, the more bikes you can try out, the better your skills are going to be, because they all transfer, and, you know, you're going to find the one that you love. So it's definitely, you know, it's trying to figure out which shoe fits perfectly. Awesome. And okay, this is a question I had for Kate and Anne, because you both have little people. How do you balance little people with your own like fitness and goals and stuff in cycling? I mean, especially Kate, where you have kids who are at like riding age, where they're ripping around. How do you find the balance of like your own training and, you know, getting kids on bikes?
Oh, it's hard. Let's be real. It is hard. It takes a lot of juggling, coordinating. So one thing we do is we now have, like, and again, let's take COVID out of this, but in normal times, riding with other families who have kids of similar age is a lot of fun. You know, and making it an adventure. If you do have young kids that are, you know, getting into riding, even little things like get them a camelback so they can carry their own water and they never take it off, and it's great for hiking. And the other thing is like this, we don't force it. If they don't want to ride, they don't have to ride. Just because mom and dad are into it hardcore, that is not an expectation, because I never want to pressure them or feel like they have to do it. I will say we're very fortunate. So full disclosure, we have a farm, and our COVID project last April was building a pump track on our farm. And a piece of trail through our forest. So that is not, I understand that is not something that everyone can or should do. But the independence it creates, that they can go out now and do their own ride, and I can go and do my own ride, makes it feel like nobody's missing out. But I would say there are places in a lot of communities that have parks, pump tracks, bike areas, like fun spots that you can take your kids and, you know, pack the picnic, go ride, go outside. And then I also have once a week, every Thursday, without fail, we book a babysitter. So that is mom's time to ride once a week, no, non-negotiable. And in the winter, I fat bike on those nights, or I ski, or we hike if the weather isn't good for riding. It is sanity. It is well worth the investment. I will ride a lesser bike and older gear to keep that babysitter coming. So it's finding solutions, and it is hard, but at the same point, I see the joy that my kids have now for the sport that's happened very organically and not in any forced or pressured way. And so it's all worth it. Do I wish I could ride more than I do? All the time. Do I have to turn down invites? All the time. But I also say to my friends, please keep inviting me, because although I might say no 9 times, on that 10th time, I will be able to say yes. So please just don't stop inviting me. I always want to say yes. It's just not always realistic.
I love it. I love it. Well, and what I also am like always so impressed with you is the crew of other moms that you have amassed around you that are now biking. I feel like you've set this example that like it's okay to carve out the you time to go on your own ride where we don't have to have all the kids with us. You get to shred on the trails yourself. So
completely. I think I'm glad I sort of should have mentioned. I'm sorry I forgot that, Molly, but yeah, I think I sort of have been able to reflect to the other women in the community. It's okay to ride your bike without your kids. Do it. And I think yeah, so most of them now, for all of us through the summer, it's Thursday nights, husbands are on duty, nana's on duty, babysitters on duty, whatever you got to do. And we all get together, and I think we averaged 9 or 10 riders, most rides, all women, all moms. Non-moms are welcome too. And that was it's really fun. And it just sort of built and built and built. Now we have our own little WhatsApp chat, and everyone always invites someone else to join, and then they invite someone else, and they invite the next person, and it slowly builds.
Awesome. I love it. Anne, did you have anything to add about the balance act?
I just want to say I want to move where Kate is. Because that sounds like an awesome community. Honestly, like, I'll just be really candid. I don't ride that much anymore. My daughter's 4, and it's COVID times. I don't ride much anymore. We have no help. We obviously can't have anyone like here right now. So yeah, I mean, if we want to ride, it's, you go ride, I'll stay home. You go ride, I stay home. So I probably do more cross training, and I hike because that's what my daughter likes to do now. But, if I go out, it's just a matter of swapping out with Brian, and I don't ride for 4 or 5 hours anymore. I haven't since she was born. That doesn't mean that other parents don't, and that's awesome if they can and that works for them. But it's just the way that we have no family here or anything. So it's shorter. They're maximum like an hour and a half is the longest ride I think I've done the last 3 years. But still, it's just nice to get out and pedal and do some cross training. And maybe, my daughter's 4, so yeah, she likes her bike, but she loves to run. So like Kate was saying, I'm not going to make her ride her bike if she would rather run or hike. So it's definitely adjustment, but it kind of comes with the territory, and everyone's different, right? So maybe some people just keep on going and they race and they still ride, and there's no judgment. Like, everyone's just different. And in all fairness, I've had one too many concussions, so I no longer do a lot of hard group riding for that reason as well. So probably a different perspective for many reasons, but yeah, I do what I can with what I have.
Yeah, but I think that's such an important perspective, even just like saying, hey, okay, you're no longer riding the 4 to 5 hour rides, but you're doing 60 minutes. Like, that still is cycling. That is still, you're a cyclist. And I think sometimes we get very into the definition of like who we used to be was the cyclist, and now we like don't have as much time, so we're only out a couple times a week. So now we're not like, no, if you ride a bike, you're a cyclist. Like, end of story, period.
Molly,
for sure.
Can I jump in there too?
Yes, I was going to ask you next. So perfect.
A 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. And like Anne, I would say that up until about a year ago, I didn't ride very much at all. And then COVID happened, and I needed some me time. And I actually refound the love of bike riding, which was pretty great. And both my husband and I are incredibly involved with cycling. The kids have lived through bike racing their whole lives. Watching my son ride his bike, I kind of hope he doesn't get into bike racing. It's terrifying to watch. I actually was wondering the other day, I'm like, do people who don't know just how sketchy what he's doing? Like, if I'm a regular parent and I don't know just how terrifying he's being, would I be as scared as I am watching him be just like crazy? But they ride their bikes to school. We want to do a couple of like little adventure rides with them, but all the riding we do, same sort of thing as Anne was saying, is swapping in and out. It's like most of the riding I do by myself, which is clearly more of a COVID thing. When I first started back last year, I went and joined a couple of the girls to watch them do some intervals and rode back, and cracked myself so badly I couldn't get out of bed for like 4 hours afterwards. And luckily, again, my husband is very involved, so he just thought it was funny as opposed to being angry at me. But yeah, I think that's it. It's just finding ways to work it into your life. And I'm a big believer that kids will find what they want to do. And my kids have clearly found that when they say, can I ride the track when I'm 10 is cute. So they say it, but both Chris and I are like, I'm not sure I want to. But it's yeah, no, I think it's a fun adventure. But the really cool thing about bikes in general is it's a lifelong sport, and I don't think you get a lot of sports that are lifelong. I mean, you got pickleball, but it's hard to start pickleball when you're 10. And then a lot of other sports, they just get really hard to do. But I think cycling can be done at so many different paces and so many different ways that it just is something that you can do for your whole life. And you see these amazing people that are like 105 doing like hour records and stuff like that. And man, I wish I could be that person, but I think you just have to deal with life in what it gives you right now, and the freedom of being on your bike and sharing that with my kids. And yeah, I hope they love riding in the forest, because that's the part that I love. And if they want to race, then so be it. But I hope we can just spend some time together doing that.
I love that so much. And I also wanted to ask you, I mean, what would your advice be? I know we have some younger people on this who are on the participant list here who are, you know, sort of contemplating the careers in cycling. So I kind of had like a two-part question. Is one is just like generic, like what would your career advice be for someone to break into, you know, the goal of getting a role like you have? And the other thing is, how do you balance when your job is also what you do for fun? Because I would like to know the answer personally, please.
Yeah, I think, well, as far as getting into anything in sport, I think it's like getting into any career. The truth is, a lot of how you're going to start is going to be volunteer. But if you look at what you do in any career, I mean, when I did accounting right out of university, and I wasn't quite volunteer, but I was not much above that, if I'm entirely honest. So it is just understanding that if this is something you want to do, then it as far as careers go, it's going to take a while. And I would say find somebody who does what you do and reach out. It's not dissimilar to riding, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure if there's anybody here who's like, you know what, I really want to do journalism, Molly would like probably talk to you for days about how awesome and this is what. And I mean, it's interesting to me because I was thinking the other day, I'm like, well, you know, who would I want to work with in Canada? And I'm like going through all these people and I'm like, we don't have that many high level coaches in Canada, but that's all I've found. Like when I'm like, I'd like to work with this. No, okay. And I was like, look at that. I didn't, you know, they're all women. And I think it's up to us to help each other and build that up. And everybody who I've heard talk, you know, like it's, okay, so this is what I'm doing. You know what? I'd love to have some friends. Come join me. Let's do this together. And so I think that's a big part. And if there's anybody who wants to get into kind of that coaching area, again, Chantal and I will probably talk more than you care to listen, if I'm entirely honest, about these sorts of things. And then as far as, yeah, the balance between your career and your hobby is, as I said, I didn't ride from when my son was born until probably about a year ago. So that was 6 years where I really just didn't. I love bike racing, but I saw it every day, and so I like kind of forgot that I loved it, if that makes sense. I think you have to just compartmentalize some time and be like, this is for me. And again, that there's that just general place where we always compare ourselves, right? Like, well, this is where I was, or this is where the people that I work with are, and like, hey, I'm really proud, you know, like, so I rode some Zwift this winter and I was like, man, I hit a PB for 6 minutes. I'm really proud of myself. It's like, you know, but it's one of those things that you just kind of have to reframe everything and separate that time for yourself. And if that's cycling, then great. And if that's running, great. If that's, you know, like walking to the park and sitting on a bench so that you get some sunshine on your face, I think that's great too. But for me, one of the big things about riding is it just gives me time to be outside. And one of the really interesting things for me is that I feel like I should be able to actually justify it as part of my job. if for no other reason, then that's when I actually think best, is when I'm riding. Because you're like, oh, well, I'll do some work. And so trying to justify that for myself sometimes too, especially, again, I've got 2 small kids in the house, and it's like, we don't ever leave the house now. So it's like, okay, well, if I go out for a bike ride, I actually get to have continuous thoughts for a whole hour at a time and things like that. So reframing it and just taking a little bit of time to put yourself first, which is, especially as moms, I don't think we're super great at doing.
Fair enough. Yes. No, great answer. And actually, Kate, I kind of want to come back to something that I had made you talk about there, is the, crew of women that you have to ride with. I want to like back up. How did you accrue this group of women? Because one question that keeps coming up is like, how do I find women to ride with? And like, I know for a fact that not all of those women were just like out riding and you just ran into them on the trail one night.
No, for sure. That's a great point. So literally what happened is I had one friend, her name's Carolyn, who said, I want to learn how to mountain bike. And I said, okay, like she's fit, she works out, she ran, she's played hockey in the past, nothing competitive, just a strong recreational person, just like to be active. So no high performance anything for her. I said, great, let's go ride bikes. I lent her one of my bikes. She had an old helmet. She was wearing, like, using flat pedals and running shoes, and we just started riding together. And so I sort of committed to ride with her once a week. And I said, I saw my own riding. I still do race a little bit, just locally, and for fun. And I said, but once a week I can commit to getting out riding with you. And then she said, hey, my friend Mel would like to join us. So then it was Kate, Carolyn, and Mel. And then Mel was like, hey, my friend Suze and Jen would like to join us. So then it was Kate, Carolyn, Mel, Suze, Jen. And honestly, it did grow from word of mouth. And we're all at different levels. We are all at different confidence levels, but we've all brought ourselves up. So like when I look back now, like this coming summer will be our 3rd summer of riding together. And I think of where we started and where those girls are at now and how much they've improved, how much more they're loving it. Like they're addicted, they don't miss a night. And we hold each other accountable, like, okay, who's in, why are you not coming? How can we combine kids, not in COVID, but kids to share a babysitter so that you can get out? And so it did start really organically. And then just last summer, we figured out, don't judge, but we're like, oh, there's this thing called WhatsApp. Maybe we should use that to communicate as a group. So that is less like smoke signals and pigeons. But yeah, we sort of organized ourselves a little bit. And we were all members of Cork, and so there's that part of it, but really it was more just let's bring ladies together in the community. And so it's every Thursday, 6 o'clock. We kind of go between one of 3 different places, and it's a group ride. So I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that if you show up to ride on this night, on this time with these women, it is a group ride. Nobody gets left behind. You wait at intersections. It's no drop. It's supportive. If you want to try something a second time, and there's a few of us, myself, I went and did some coaching course this past fall for my Nccp. And so I say, like, I'm a beginner coach and I would love to give you pointers if you're receptive to that. Otherwise, we just ride. And so sometimes they'll put their hand up and say, hey, can I follow you through this, or can you show me how you would ride that? And so we'll do that a little bit, but it's not a clinic, it's not a skill session. It's just, let's go ride bikes for an hour 15, and then have a refreshment afterwards, and then see you next week, kind of thing. And so it's been awesome. It's been the highlight of my last few summers for sure.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I wanted to bring that up just to kind of point out, that I'm a huge believer in the, seeking help with clinics and coaching and all of that stuff. But I'm also a huge believer in these like very organic, very just like, hey, invite one person to ride. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to start like a Facebook page group, whatever, to get it going. It can start with just, you text one friend and then the next week they, ask somebody else, and it kind of grows from there.
Yeah, and the only thing we kind of put on it is be prepared to ride for an hour. So we never say like a distance or a speed or anything, but be prepared to pedal for an hour. So that was sort of the barometer for whether somebody would be at a comfort level to participate on our rides. And so I do think, you don't want to bring somebody out and have them totally swamped and in over their heads. That's not fun for anybody. And that's more where you do that in a one-on-one session and you go out with that person. But so when you're in a group, I do think it's reasonable to say, we're pedaling for an hour or we're pedaling for an hour and a half. And then people can have enough water, have enough food, not be blown up from their 20K run that morning. So I do think it's okay to put some of those guidelines on whatever you're doing.
I refuse to go on rides that don't have a start and an end time personally. That's my hill I'm willing to die on, although most of you know my husband and realize why I have that rule in place, because otherwise it would be a big problem. Okay, Chantal, someone had asked about coaching, so I want you to just quickly explain just what the OCA has to offer. I know you already put it in the chat, but then while she's doing that, I want everyone to think of the one best piece of advice that they want to give so we can end on that. So Chantal, take that away, and then we're hitting best advice. Lightning round.
So on the Ontario Cycling Association website, if you don't have a way of bookmarking that, just on our website, there is literally a tab called coaching and coaching overview. And it just kind of overviews the NCCP coaching pathway. NCCP is the certification for all coaches in all disciplines across Canada. You don't have to necessarily start by coaching competitive riders. You can start with just recreational or community sport. So just on that website, there's a tab that says, I want to coach recreational riders. And it actually lists basically in order the 5 courses you have to take. They range from free 1 hour on demand to the final course is basic cycling skills, which is actually like in person where you're taught to kind of follow a lesson plan. And if you're interested in getting to work with more competitive riders, whether that be youth or masters who are racing, you'd click on the I want to coach competitive riders tab. Honestly, the first like 4 courses are identical. So they're very similar. And it just gets a little more in-depth, including making yearly training plans or skills and tactics for your discipline specifically. So if you're a mountain bike, you've done perhaps some racing or some riding, and now you want to actually work with athletes, kind of like Kate. Perhaps Kate wants to keep continuing with her coaching development. I think you've maybe already taken the mountain bike skills and tactics. That's what Kate is doing, is taking those courses there so she can deliver to people who maybe are looking for more of a competitive experience. And if you have any questions, again, email me or just phone us and I can answer that.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Lightning round so we can wrap this up. Sandra, best advice.
Best advice, try and find like-minded women to connect with and to ride with, whether it's through an online platform, whether it's through word of mouth, just find like-minded women.
Love it. Charlotte?
I would say just the first step, the hardest step is getting out the door and doing it. So just get out there and do it. Remove any expectation. The goal is just to get out and have fun. Fun is the key.
Yes, 100 times yes. All right, Anne, best advice.
I would say keep the mindset of a learner. So at any point, if you think, well, I'm not good at this, you can get good at that. So never box yourself out as being tapped out in any skill. You can be racing for a decade, 15 years, you are still learning. So always remember that the effort that you put in pays off and you're not just stuck where you are ever.
Yes. Kate, your best advice.
Okay, I'm going to give a little tip based on what I've seen with this group of women that I ride with. And that is, go out to your driveway, put a stick or a 2x4 in your driveway and just ride back and forth across it. It will make most routes and obstacles you come across on the trail way easier. Charlotte's laughing because she's probably done this a million times. And like, you don't even need to be on a trail, like just your driveway or your road or somewhere, a field. Just go to a field, put down a stick and just practice going over it. Lighten the front of your tire and just do this. And it's that learner mentality that Anne said, like, you know, we put up these big blocks in our mind, and there's always a way through it if you're willing to check your ego, be humble, and keep learning.
So good. Chantal, best advice.
I'm pretty sure that everybody you asked to be in this webinar said yes. I bet you there wasn't a female you asked who said no. And that kind of goes along with the theme of mentorship, and like, just don't be afraid to ask for help, or, you know, if you see somebody like on this panel who's doing what you think you want to do, reach out and ask them. Maybe, again, non-COVID times, maybe you can join them. Maybe there's a day that Jenny's going to be coaching the national team and they need extra help trackside. Show up. Like, we have Teams of Ontario camps. Sometimes we have racing opportunities where we need volunteers on the infield. And just by volunteering and giving yourselves those opportunities for exposure, you may discover specifically what you want to do in cycling. So just don't be afraid to take that step.
Oh, love it. Jenny, best advice.
I feel like everyone has said those. I think find people to love it with. Have no preconceptions of what this needs to be a cyclist, is to ride a bike, as you said, Molly. Like, get out there, love it. That's all you need to do. And yeah, reach out, connect. Don't ever be shy to say that you want to do something and that you want some help trying to figure something out. And if the person that you reach, if it's somebody on this panel and that we're not the right people, I'm sure we'll put you in touch with the right people. So please take that network and enjoy riding your bike. I think summer's almost here. It keeps like coming and then leaving, coming and then leaving, but we're almost there. We get to ride our bikes and just love it. Be out there and have fun.
Yes. Oh, so much amazing advice. Mine is really just to find a comfortable pair of bib shorts that you can ride in, and that will make a world of difference. Also, I should note, over in the chat, I'm seeing people actually like connecting, making ride plans. It is giving me so much joy. I cannot thank all of you enough for being on this panel, all of you participating in this, for showing up, for asking questions, for just hanging out and, you know, hearing us talk for the past hour. I appreciate it so much. This will all be up over on the OCA's YouTube channel, along with all of the other webinars. If you missed my awkward conversations one on Monday, the Red Us one last week, or your guide to getting started riding outside from last week, those are all up there. So yeah, check those out. And in June, we'll be back with another women's cycling set of awesomeness. So again, thank you all so much. Everyone here is amazing. I'm so excited to get to hang out with all of you cool women for the past, hour here. So yeah, thank you all so much for joining us, and have an amazing rest of your night. All right. Bye, everybody.